Okay, yeah. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Planning Management Committee on the 2nd of July at 10 a.m. Please note that the public session of this meeting will be recorded and published online for the public access after the meeting. Does anybody object to this?
No.
Any objection? Thank you.
No, are we having a roll call?
Yeah, if you could just bear with me. We've got a process and I'll go through it. Thank you, Councillor Copeland. Can all attendants switch off their cameras and mute their microphone when they're not speaking? The camera and microphone should only be switched on when you're invited to speak. Guidance on how to do this is contained in the guidance issued to you. I will now ask the clerk to advise the members participating today and for all members to confirm their attendance once their names has been announced by the clerk so that it's clear in the recording of the meeting and can also be recorded by the clerk for a minute. I'll Ms. McLean.
Thank you, convener. So if you can just say if you're here or not. Councillor Bolton.
Here.
Councillor Jennifer Stewart.
Here.
Councillor Allen.
Present.
Councillor Cook.
Here.
Councillor Copeland.
Here.
Councillor Hendrickson.
Here.
And we've also got Councillor Alphonse that will come in after the first application to sub. Oh, is she here?
Here.
Okay. Councillor Gregg.
Here.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Here.
Councillor Malik.
Here.
Okay, we're all good to go.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McLean. There are a number of items of quasi-judicial business for the committee to consider today. Members are reminded that if they leave the room or the meeting during consideration of any application, they will be unable to participate or vote on that item when they return. Please advise the clerk while meeting chat that you're leaving the room and therefore unable to determine the item. Right, if we could move on to the business for today. Can I just check that you've all got the procedural note on pages 5 to 6? Okay. Yes. Okay, there's no determination for urgent business today. Have members got any declarations of interest? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. Anybody? No. Okay, so I'm just picking up. Right, if we could then move on to the minutes of the previous meetings, they're on page 9 to 22. Can we agree they're an accurate minute? Agreed. Okay, I'll just take that.
Agreed.
I'll take silence as nobody's got any objection.
Agreed.
Okay, super. If we could move on to the Planning Management Committee Business Planner, it's there for noting, and you can see from the planner that all items are on the agenda for today. Okay. We've taken for the general business, we've taken a report first, and we've got Mr. Berry who's going to talk us through. It's item 6.1, the review of the 2-year waiver on affordable housing in the city centre. Mr. Berry, if you'd like to introduce it, please.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. Just briefly, I suppose, by way of background to this report, members of the committee, I'm sure, will recall that a waiver on affordable housing requirements for city centre residential developments was approved back in September of 2018 at the committee at that point. And that waiver was introduced following the publication of a city centre living study, which recommended a moratorium on city centre developer obligation requirements. And that was really aimed at helping to tackle some of the viability issues and challenges for city centre residential development, with the ultimate aim really of helping to deliver more city centre living and more city centre residential development. So the waiver currently runs until the 30th of December of this year. And the intention was that we would bring back a review of the waiver process towards the end of that period. And to allow time for processing applications, applicants have been advised to submit qualifying applications by the end of June of 2020. And given that we've obviously just passed that date, it means really it's a timely opportunity to review the waiver process. And really to hopefully give some clarity for applicants about the future of that policy beyond December. So as outlined in the report, we have undertaken an initial review of the waiver. There are some limitations around the data available for that review, but in summary, it's shown a significant increase in both the number of applications and the number of approvals for city centre residential development since the waiver was introduced. And we've seen in the region of 600 units on applications that have come forward, and approvals for approximately 450 units to date since that waiver was introduced. I think that it's also important to note the impact of the coronavirus crisis and the COVID-19 lockdown in particular. There's no doubt that will have had an impact and has had an impact on the development industry. And that's likely to have suppressed, I think, the delivery of development, obviously over the lockdown period, and probably the number of applications that may well otherwise have come forward during that period as well. So what I think that means is that it's quite difficult to draw firm conclusions on the effectiveness of the waiver at present, because the lockdown is likely to have altered the results that we might otherwise have seen. I think we also know it's fair to say that the recovery from the COVID crisis is likely to take some time, and the development industry is likely to face challenges for some time to come in terms of its recovery from the crisis. And I think these factors essentially mean that the recommendations of the city centre living study, as it was originally completed, are probably just as relevant today, if not even more so than they were at the time. So as a consequence of all of that, it's proposed to extend the affordable housing waiver for city centre residential developments for an 18-month period, so that it would run until the end of June of 2022. And it's also proposed to carry forward a fairly key feature of that existing waiver policy, which is the 1-year time limit for implementing any planning permission that is granted with that waiver. And that's really intended to help incentivise the delivery of development and to actually bring forward development rather than just increase the rate of planning permissions or planning applications that are coming forward. And it's really intended to create, I suppose, that almost a sort of use it or lose it type of situation for developers and incentivise to get on and actually deliver development. So that was all I was really planning to say by way of introduction. The recommendation, as I say, in summary, is to extend the waiver for that 18-month period and to carry on with that 1-year time limit for implementing any consent. So I'm happy to take any questions or points of clarification if that be helpful as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Berry. Have we got any questions for Mr. Berry? You can put your hand up if you have. I'm not seeing any. Oh, we have. Who's that? Sorry.
Me.
Martin, is that you?
Hello. Hi, thanks. Yeah, I've got a query on page 26 at 3.5. There's mention there of the number of housing units that have been given consent to proceed. So there were applications for 600 and 450 received permission to proceed. That's about 75%. But there's been no completion of any of these development proposals within. And so the query is, in the last 18 months, since this concession was given, we've not actually seen anything happen. So is that a reasonable situation we're in? Is it desirable? It just, it's just somewhat disappointing that there's been nothing. There's no evidence of anything being completed.
Mr. Berry.
Sure. I suppose just one point of clarification as well on the numbers. That paragraph refers to 600 units on applications and 450 approvals. Yeah. Just to be clear, that doesn't mean that the balance there has been refused. It's just that there are probably a number of applications still in the system that are waiting to be determined. So I just wanted to clarify that first of all. I think in terms of the point about completions, I would probably go back to what I was saying about the lockdown. So that I think will have had an impact on, it's had an impact on the development industry across the board, and it's quite likely that may have impacted delivery that we perhaps otherwise would have seen over the last few months. And I think it's probably worthwhile pointing out that yes, we perhaps would have liked to see more completions, or the statistics showing more completions. They have shown that start has been made on a number of sites, and I think probably given the nature of a lot of city centre development, which is, a lot of it is going to be flats, for example, which tend to be completed in blocks as opposed to housing estate developments, for example, where you might see individual completions of individual units. That may well have had an impact on kind of the rate of completions that we're seeing currently.
Councillor Gregg.
Could I come back, please?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. That's helpful. The waiver was in place for 17 months before the lockdown began. So for me that seems quite a considerable length of time. And could I ask a follow-up question, which is, if building work has begun, then obviously the conditions and the consents then continue. They're permanent. Is that right? And if so, yeah.
I was just going to say, I'll maybe bring in Mr. Lewis, who's obviously more au fait with the actual developments. Mr. Lewis, could you perhaps help Councillor Gregg?
Yes, just going to come back on the completion side of things. I'm just aware that Triple Kirks, which is a significant portion of units in the city centre, was due, I'm aware, back in March to get its first occupation certificates in April time. And there's already 2 phased occupations, 2 stages for that development. So that is actually a development that has been completed, to which the affordable housing waiver applies.
Right. And do you know how many units would pertain to that development?
I think we're talking 320.
All right, quite a considerable amount. Okay. Many thanks.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg.
Thank you.
I've got Councillor Copeland.
Thank you, convener. My question's been partly answered. I was going to ask how many units in total would the 3 sites where work's been commenced with amount to? The 450. I mean, Daniel's just told us we've got 300 plus at one site. How much total would there be?
Mr. Lewis, can you maybe perhaps help Councillor Copeland?
I'm sorry, I don't have the detailed statistics on that, I'm afraid.
And Mr. Berry, I don't suppose you'll have those to hand, do you? Or do you?
I do have some statistics. I'm just trying to have a quick look through the data that we reviewed. Yeah, I think the bulk of them are on the site that Daniel, that Mr. Lewis referred to in terms of the Triple Kirks development. So that's about 320, 340. Over and above that, we've got a couple of other sites with units. Just quickly looking through data, about another 60 in addition to that as well. So probably just under 400 or so in total on sites which have actually started development.
So it'd be fair to say we've had one big one and a couple of small ones, yeah? Fair.
Yes, I think that is fair to say, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Copeland. Any other questions? No? Okay, we have the recommendations on the first page of the report at page 25 of the agenda pack, which is at 2.1 to approve the 18-month extension to the waiver on an affordable housing requirement relating to planning applications for new build housing developments and changes to residential use in the city centre, such that the waiver continues to apply for applications determined until the 30th of June 2022, subject to direction applied to the grant of planning permissions, time limiting the duration of the relevant consents to 12 months. Can we agree that? Councillor Cook?
Thanks, convener. I'd like to move an amendment.
Okay, do you want to, have you got a seconder first of all, probably? Well, you
I
will.
hope so.
I wasn't sure if you've maybe arranged it.
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay, Councillor Cook, what would you like to?
I'd like to move that the committee takes no action.
Okay, well, obviously I've got the motion, so I'll be moving off the recommendation within the report. We are facing a horrendous situation, not just in Aberdeen, but globally, where it's imperative that we move forward as a city and keep our place. I think that we have had a long ambitions for the city centre to become a residential destination. And I think more so now than ever, we have to make sure that these plans come to fruition and remove any barriers to developers being able to make these happen. So, you know, I won't say any more than that other than to move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Where's my hands?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. I know it's interesting. Would
Yes.
you like to say anything?
No, just happy to second you, convener. Very difficult times. We need to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Cook, would you like to say anything?
Yes, thank you, convener. Yeah, so my amendment, which is committee takes no action, would have the effect of the waiver ceasing on the 31st of December this year. At the outset, I actually agree with a lot of what you've just said. I think it is desirable that we encourage city centre living. So I believe that the recommendation and what you're proposing is well intentioned. My difficulty with it is that the waiver, which excludes affordable housing provision, is not sufficiently inclusive. So I don't think we should be, I do want to encourage city centre living, but not to the exclusion of lower paid folk, refuse collectors, supermarket checkout people, nurses, etc., etc. So that's why I have a difficulty with the waiver. I'm perfectly willing to accept that the waiver may well have incentivized more development, residential development in the city centre. It's not really surprising if you say to a developer, if you build something 10 metres on this side of a line, your profit margin will be X. If you build it 10 metres on that side of a line on the map, your profit margin will be X plus Y. It's not rocket science. Don't have anything against developers. I just think, what they're going to do. Can't blame them for responding to an incentive that we put in place. I do, however, as I say, question the need for the waiver because it excludes lower paid people. Excuse me, sorry. And I think in terms of the impact of COVID, I actually think that COVID means that we have an even greater need for affordable housing than we did previously. And I also think it means that the economics of building in the city centre for a residential developer are going to be better than previously. Looking at some of the stats that were in the papers on the Urgent Business Committee on Tuesday, they're quite scary in terms of the economic impact. I think we saw 3,000 people having lost their jobs since lockdown started. There are a lot of people on furlough. Some of those people on furlough will lose their jobs, unfortunately. Even those that won't, some of them will have been dipping into their savings. So basically, the folk we have here are economically more fragile than ever before. Hence, we need more affordable housing, not less. If you then look at the commercial property market, that is in a parlous state. Lockdown has accelerated the long-term trend to online shopping. We also have lots of empty office space in Aberdeen. So if you're a commercial property landlord in the centre of Aberdeen, and indeed in this applies right across Scotland and the rest of the UK as well, you're looking at having commercial property. Your leaseholder goes bust. There is not a huge number of people queuing up to take on that lease. So you might as well cut your losses and sell the property to a residential developer. So that will increase the commercial viability of a residential development in the city centre. Hence, the need for the waiver is much less than it was. That's basically it. You know, I said at the outset, encourage city centre living. That's great, but not to the exclusion of lower paid people. And I just don't think that the waiver is any longer necessary, particularly in the light of the COVID crisis. That's really it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Copeland, your seconder.
Yeah, thank you, convener. I've obviously seconded Councillor Cook. I think you made very valid points about the requirement of lower paid people need housing as well. Excuse me, my house phone's going. Give me a second.
Sorry, folks, so just wait for Councillor Copeland to come back. Okay, carry on.
Sorry about that.
That's
yeah,
okay.
I mean, we cannot, in all honesty, not make affordable housing available to people with the city centre. By excluding affordable housing, you're basically excluding a whole section of the community from the opportunity to live in a city centre. And the more people we can attract into the city centre, the more vibrant the city centre is going to become. I know the council are quite keen on a cafe culture, and not only people living in expensive houses have a cafe culture, working people do as well. As Councillor Cook said, we've got to encourage nurses and people who work in supermarkets who've been leaving essential services for us. We've got to acknowledge the fact that they're not well paid, but we shouldn't exclude them. And I think that we have to give every opportunity to have affordable housing in a city. We badly need it right across the board. And again, the boundaries, Councillor Cook said, the 10 yards one way, you're paying, 10 yards the other way, you're not paying. We can't, in all honesty, justify that, I don't think. I don't think the incentive has been successful. We've had one major development completed. My memory of that site is that site changed a few times before the incentive came in. I don't know if the incentive had anything to do with it, but it certainly changed because I seem to remember that was a different type of housing originally. We've got two small sites that's been worked on. It hasn't led to a mass influx of applications and building work to create houses and conversions in the city centre. I don't think it actually served its intent to attract people into the city centre. So for that reason, I don't think we need it. So I'll be supporting councillors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Copeland. I see Councillor Allen, you'd like to come in?
Yes, thank you, convener. I'm just a bit concerned here about the position of the housing associations that developers usually partner up with when we have social housing. I mean, I am very much a supporter of social housing, but I am aware also, and maybe some of the officers could comment on this, I am also aware that they are struggling, that the housing associations are struggling financially because of the COVID, and it might be that it would be for developers to actually get a partner to do that in social housing at present. And if we go along the line of the recommendations, then that would give them time to build up again and to recover a bit from the COVID situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Gregg?
Yes, thank you, convener. I was very supportive of this initiative when we agreed it in September 2018. It was an experiment that was worth trying. The evidence back isn't wholly conclusive of continuing with this experiment. It would be useful, convener, to hear a little more from yourself about why you think it's important to support the continuation of the moratorium. You mentioned that it's important to remove any barrier to development. I wouldn't entirely agree with that. I want, like you, like so many of us, I want to see more housing in the city centre. I want to see it become a more residential area. There is the risk that the moratorium doesn't deliver what we want for the city centre. So this might not be the way to increase housing in the city centre. There has been an increase in applications, but the completion record is a bit variable. So that's a further risk there. So I'm looking forward to hearing more from the debate. I also agree that the city needs more affordable housing, but you know, this was an experiment. It was worth trying, and whilst it doesn't address our need for more affordable housing, it does satisfy that drive to turn our city centre into a more vibrant area. So so I'll continue listening to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Could I just ask Councillor Allen and Councillor Stewart to take their hands down, because they're still showing on my screen and I can't quite work out how to do it, to take them down myself. Thank you. Is there anybody else wants to join in debate? No? Okay. Well, we'll go to summing up. So Councillor Cook, would you like to sum up? And I'll try and address some of your concerns, Councillor Gregg, in my summing up. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, I'll be brief. Councillor Allen has, on a number of occasions, made some very, very good points about affordable housing and housing associations, etc. But I don't think that extending the waiver is going to incentivise developers to talk to housing associations at all. As I said in my earlier remarks, I totally get the desirability of incentivising city centre living. That's great, but I just don't think we should do it in an exclusive manner. We need to do it in an inclusive manner that allows people on lower incomes the opportunity to have that city centre living. I'm sure a lot of these lower paid key workers really appreciated us all applauding them at 8 o'clock on a Thursday night. I think they'd also appreciate decent, affordable house. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cook. As always, I think as a committee, we try to come together on most things. However, I'm comfortable with the recommendations, and there's a number of reasons why. And I mean, and it's quite strange actually, because some of the comments that Councillor Cook made, such as the decline of the retail and the office industry in the city centre, for me is absolutely the reason why we need to encourage more city centre living. Because if we don't, we will have a desert within the mid heart of our city. Now, if we have more people living in the city, hopefully the offices will start to fill up, because people will recognise that they will have an employable workforce on their doorstep. There will also be people living in this accommodation that will then use our restaurants, which will then use our retail spaces far more than if they have to travel into the city centre. Again, if they're living in the city centre, it adds to our ambitions to try and reduce the amount of people taking cars into the city centre. So there's lots of pluses about encouraging city centre living. Now, we have removed the waiver because at the moment in particular, I think it's even more valid because there is additional costs with the coronavirus. I mean, I obviously head up the capital programme for the council and been speaking to contractors who have said the additional costs that they're incurring now to do development has made the case for some developments not to make them viable. So there is additional barriers being put in place through COVID and additional costs incurred. So we have to address that situation. We can't pretend it's not relevant. We've seen a delay in some of the completions that we might have had been able to report on today because of COVID, but also the applications, we have to remember, they're quite complex when they're in the city centre. There's lots of additional considerations that our planners have to take when they're looking at these applications. And these make it a longer time to be able to actually make a determination. And sometimes there's additional requirements, sound evaluations, all types of things that perhaps we wouldn't necessarily have outside the city centre. So there's numerous reasons I believe that we should continue the waiver. As I say, firstly, because we want these rooms to be occupied above our shops. They've been empty for decades, and you know, we have seen the triple curts after many false starts actually being delivered. We've got Woman Hill that's underway, and we have a number of, I think, mixed housing units in the city centre. We've got a number of our tower blocks which are well occupied by mixed families and individuals living in them. And we're not trying to exclude anybody. I mean, we've seen some amazing affordable housing units being built outside the city centre with gardens for young families to play in. And I think that's become more apparent that we want that for our families, and to make sure that people do have their own space, because trapped inside a flat perhaps over the COVID has been unbearable for some people. So I think the city centre is providing a particular type of living. I think we'll see more older people taking up the city centre living, young professionals. You know, we have to make sure that we have a vibrant city centre, heart that beats, not starts to slowly die because the retail's dying because the offices are not being occupied. If there's any steps that we can take today to secure the vibrancy and the livelihood of our hospitality sector, our retail sector, by encouraging city centre living with people with some disposable income, hopefully as we move forward in a very difficult time, I think we need to take it. Completely understand the need for affordable housing, and I think the point that Councillor Allen was trying to make was that housing associations at the moment are having a hard enough time to deliver in units they've already committed to. So to allow them to regroup through this pandemic, whilst the developers do the city centre stuff, where there's not a pressure then on housing landlords, etc., to come forward. That's, I think, the point that Councillor Allen was trying to make in her submission. So I would just move the recommendation and ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you, convener. Can everybody hear me? Okay. So the committee has before it a motion in the name of the convener to approve the recommendations contained in the report, and an amendment in the name of Councillor Cook to move no action. Could members please vote motion on amendment? Convener?
Motion.
Councillor Jennifer Stewart?
Motion.
Councillor Allen?
Motion.
Motion. Okay, thank you. Councillor Cook?
Amendment.
Councillor Copeland?
Amendment.
Councillor Hendrickson?
Amendment.
Councillor Gregg?
Motion.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Motion.
Councillor Malik?
Motion.
Thank you. The motion carries 6 votes to 3. Therefore, the report is approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, committee. I believe Councillor Hendrickson, you'll be leaving us, and I'll welcome Councillor Fons to the table. Or to the
That is correct. Thank you, convener, and I hope you all stay safe.
Okay, you too. Thank you. Are you there, Councillor Fons?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent, thank you. Right, we'll move on to the agenda for the applications. First of all, we have at 7.1 a planning permission in principle for residential development, circa 140 units, including demolition of the existing buildings and associated access, parking, landscaping, infrastructure works at Greyfriars House at the Gallowgate, Aberdeen. And that's planning reference 200246, and we have Mr. Ferguson to talk to that.
Thank you, convener. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. Right, I'll just try and share my screen with you.
Thank you. Is this your first one, Mr. Ferguson?
Virtually?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Well, good luck. I'm sure it'll go fine.
Trying to juggle everything on 2 screens. It's okay. Right. Can you see that?
We can see it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, convener. Good morning, councillors. This item is found on pages 33 to 89 of the committee agenda pack. Item 7.1 relates to an application seeking planning permission in principle for a major residential development of up to 140 flats on the site of Greyfriars House, a vacant 20th century office building situated on the eastern side of Gallowgate in the city centre. The current three-storey C-shaped building addresses the Gallowgate public car park to the north and also fronts onto Gallowgate to the west, opposite its junction with Berry Street. The building's eastern wing runs parallel to West North Street, which occupies lower ground to the east, with a landscaped embankment and the seamount steps in the intervening area of land. Due to the change in levels between the site and West North Street, the eastern wing of the building occupies a prominent elevated position when viewed from the east. Here's a few site photographs showing the existing building for context, and you can see the Mitchell Tower of Marshall College in the background, which lies approximately 100 metres to the south of the site. In terms of zoning, within the adopted local development plan, the site lies within the city centre and within a mixed-use area, although as you can see from the map, it lies just outside the city centre master plan boundary, which runs along Gallowgate to the west and down Little John Street to the south. There is a range of uses in the surrounding area, with the Bonaccord Centre to the southwest, the public car park immediately to the north, Morrison's supermarket beyond West North Street to the east. Immediately adjoining the site to the south is a residential development on Little John Street with Marshall College beyond. There's also a flatted residential development on the opposite side of Gallowgate to the west. The zoning of the site is not proposed to change in the proposed local development plan. In terms of the proposed development, it is important to note that this application seeks planning permission in principle and that the majority of the plans submitted as part of the application are for indicative purposes only. Should the application be approved, then further details of the precise site layout, number of units, the height and appearance of the buildings and other aspects would be submitted and assessed as part of subsequent matter specified in conditions applications in due course. Nevertheless, the plan sets some general parameters as to how the site could be developed, and it is envisaged that any MSC applications would be broadly in line with the plan submitted at this stage. It is proposed to demolish the existing building and to comprehensively redevelop the site. The site layout as indicatively proposed at this stage would see 3 new buildings erected, each with a linear footprint on an approximately north-south axis spread evenly across the site. A vehicular access would be maintained in the position of the existing access to the site on Gallowgate to the south of the western block, albeit the access would be widened and upgraded from the existing arrangement to allow 2-way vehicular movements. A car parking area is proposed to occupy the southern part of the site between the eastern and western blocks, and a total of 33 car parking spaces are indicatively shown at this stage, including 4 disabled bays and 6 bays with EV charge points. Ground floor flats would have access to their own private garden areas, and there would be areas of hard and soft landscaped communal external amenity areas between the buildings. In terms of the impact of the development on the existing residential development on Little John Street to the south, it is considered that the siting and orientation of the 3 linear blocks would minimize that impact, with the eastern and western blocks aligning with the gable ends of the eastern and western buildings of the neighbouring development. All of the blocks would be set in from the boundary, and the areas that could be overlooked from some of the new flats would predominantly comprise either the blank gable ends of the buildings or the communal car parking area. Due to the orientation of the buildings to the north, there would be no significant overshadowing or loss of daylight receipt affecting the neighbouring development to the south. In terms of the overall number of units, it's important to stress that as this application seeks planning permission in principle, the finalised number of units is not yet known. Whilst permission is sought for up to 140 units, the applicant envisages at this stage that the most likely number would be closer to 115. In this regard, 2 indicative schemes have been submitted which demonstrate how different numbers of units could be accommodated within the same building envelopes. The optimised illustrative scheme, as shown on this slide, is for 115 units and includes a larger mix of unit sizes, with more 1 and 2 bed flats and some 3-bed units than the maximised scheme, which incorporates more studio and 1-bed flats. The maximised scheme for 140 units would be more likely to be delivered if there was interest in the site from a build-to-rent operator, but given that market is relatively new and unproven in Aberdeen, it is envisaged that the optimised scheme for approximately 115 open market units is the more likely of the 2 schemes to be delivered. This slide shows the indicative floor plans for the optimised scheme, with studio flats coloured purple, 1-bed flats in blue, 2-bed flats in red, and the 3-bed units in green. The yellow areas on the ground floor of each of the buildings indicate communal cycle and bin store areas, with space provided to accommodate 1 cycle parking space per flat. In terms of developer obligations, the applicant has agreed to pay contributions towards primary and secondary education, healthcare, the upgrade of a nearby bus stop on Gallowgate, and for the purchase of 2 new car club cars, which would be sited within the public car park immediately to the north of the site, allowing them to be used by the occupants of the development as well as the wider community. Based on the Council's supplementary guidance, contributions were initially sought in relation to open space, sports and recreation and community facilities. However, following discussions with the applicant and acknowledging the general viability challenges of delivering large redevelopment schemes in the city centre, as noted in the city centre living strategy, we have agreed to an alternative approach in lieu of those contributions, which would see a scheme of localised public urban realm improvements implemented instead. This slide shows a basic indicative site layout for those works, with the full details to follow as part of a matter specified in conditions application. The scheme would incorporate the refurbishment and upgrade of the C-mount steps to West North Street, highlighted in purple, the poor condition of which was noted by members of the public at the pre-application consultation stage. The works would also include the widening and upgrading of the public footpath that runs along the northern edge of the site at the back of the car park, with benches and soft landscaping proposed in order to create an improved thoroughfare linking Gallowgate with the C-mount steps and an area where members of the public could sit. Works to upgrade a section of the Gallowgate pavement are also proposed, as is the potential to incorporate a canvas for a new art piece of street art. Subject to further detail at MSC stage, it is considered that in this instance, acknowledging the viability challenges for the developer, the localised urban realm enhancement scheme would deliver immediate tangible benefits for the occupants of the development as well as the wider existing city centre community. On a similar note to developer obligations, it's worth noting that the applicant intends on making use of the city centre affordable housing waiver. Therefore, provided the current application and all subsequent MSC applications are determined in accordance with the requirements and timescales as set out in the waiver, then no affordable housing would be required. This slide shows the proposed alterations to the existing vehicular access to the site on Gallowgate, which would include widening the junction to cater for 2-way movements. Given the proximity of the junction to Berry Street, it is acknowledged that allowing cars to enter and exit the site with right turns could cause road safety issues. Therefore, a central island in the middle of the Gallowgate carriageway is proposed to be installed in order that cars could only enter and exit the site on a safer left-in, left-out basis. In terms of height and massing, the buildings are proposed at this stage to step up from 5 stories at the western block facing onto Gallowgate to 7 stories at the highest northern part of the eastern block. This slide shows the heights of the buildings and how they would step up from Gallowgate when looking south from the public car park to the north. This slide shows how the southern ends of the central and eastern blocks would be terraced. These terraces would help to reduce the massing and horizontal emphasis of the buildings, and would also be utilised as private external amenity spaces for some of the flats. And this just gives you another indicative view of the buildings looking to the north and to the west. These next few slides show the indicative massing of the proposed buildings when viewed from key viewpoints around the site. This slide shows you the view from outside Brewdog on Gallowgate looking north. This slide shows the view looking south from further up Gallowgate with the Mitchell Tower of Marshall College in the background. As part of the pre-application process, we advised that the use of linear blocks on a north-south axis could enable the setting of the Mitchell Tower to actually be enhanced compared to the existing situation. And this view shows that there would be a new gap created between the buildings in the area where the road sign is. The gap would help to open up new views of the Mitchell Tower from parts of the Gallowgate. This slide shows the indicative massing of the eastern block when viewed from the junction of Meal Market Street and West North Street. And another image of the eastern block taken from the Morrison's supermarket car park to the northeast. And this one is from Berry Street. So it shows that there would be a slight increase in the height compared to the existing building. Although detailed elevational drawings are not required at planning permission and principal stage, we requested that due to the prominent elevated position of the site, particularly when viewed from the east, the applicant submit some indicative renders of the buildings to provide a better indication as to how they could look compared to the blank white massing images of the previous few slides. It's important to note that the images on this slide are completely indicative and would be subject to further detailed design and assessment in subsequent applications. And the final slide, due to the height and elevated prominence of the eastern block, we consider policy D3 big buildings of the local development plan to be applicable, and policy D3 requires big buildings to have a slender vertical emphasis. This slide shows that whilst the envelope of the eastern block would have a relatively horizontal emphasis, there are ways in which the elevational treatment of the building could be modelled, for example, through the use of recesses and contrasting materials to provide the more vertical emphasis that policy D3 seeks. We are comfortable that this could be achieved via further design work at MSC stage. In terms of comments submitted by members of the public, 2 representations have been received in relation to the application, 1 objecting and 1 neutral. The matters raised in these representations are addressed on pages 53 and 54 of the agenda pack. To conclude, the planning service considers that the redevelopment of the site for residential use is acceptable in accordance with the aims and policies of both the adopted and proposed local development plans, as well as the aims and objectives of the city centre master plan. A satisfactory residential environment could be created for the occupants of the new development without unduly impinging on the amenity of any neighbouring uses. The proposed site layout and the heights, massing and positioning of the proposed buildings are all considered to be acceptable in relation to the surrounding city centre context, and they would not adversely affect the existing townscape or the setting of nearby listed buildings. It is therefore considered that, subject to a legal agreement to secure the previously mentioned developer obligations, and subject to the conditions noted on pages 57 to 63 of the agenda pack, the proposed redevelopment of the site for up to 140 residential units is acceptable in principle, and the application is therefore recommended for approval. I'll just hand you over to Scott Leach, who will give you a brief update on how the affordable housing waiver would be applied to this development. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Ferguson. Mr. Leith, over to yourself.
Hi, thanks, convener. Yes, just following on from Mr. Ferguson's presentation there, just a small update to the application from what you see in the report before you. The report currently suggests that a time limit direction would be used to limit the permission to 12 months. However, we feel it's appropriate to remove this because the application is for planning permission in principle, which is a bit unusual for a city centre development. So there's the second stage process where matters specified in condition approvals would be required before development could commence. So the proposal is to revert back to the standard 3-year planning permission in principle period, and the 12-month period for the affordable housing waiver would be set out in a clause within the Section 75 agreement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leith. That's helpful. Councillor Allen, I saw your hand up first.
Yes, thank you, convener. This is maybe too much detail at this point, but I did notice on one of your pictures.
Frozen. You've frozen, Councillor.
Bedroom, 3 bedroom, yeah.
Do you want to say that again? You froze for a second.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Oh, it's really quite warm where I am. I don't know why I froze, but never mind.
Very good.
I want to ask relevance to the 1, 2, 3 bedroom situations and where they'll be positioned, given that you showed us little coloured, and you also said that the ground floor would have an element of garden. And I'd be interested, and maybe you can't answer this at this stage.
Unfortunately, Councillor Allen, you've stopped again. You'd be interested to. I think Councillor Allen's still frozen.
I can go back to the slide. I didn't really make too much of that.
I think if you take up the slide that shows, you know, where the actual flats will be, I think it's to do with the outdoor area for the.
I want to know if the children will manage to be with the gardens.
Did you get that?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
I think it was about safety for the children in the gardens, was it, Councillor Allen?
No, it's not so much safety. I want to know if.
I think what she was saying was like where the 3 bedroom flats were situated. So would that be close to the park? I think that's what she was saying.
Okay, so the 3. Can you see the slide?
Yes.
Yeah. So the 3 bedroom flats are indicatively proposed as the ones highlighted in green. So if you can see my cursor, there's 2 in the western block on the ground floor, 2 in the central block, and then there's also ones higher up on the 5th and 6th floor of the central and eastern blocks. These 2 would have access to roof terraces, as with this one, and then this one wouldn't have access to the roof terrace, but would be at 6th floor in the eastern block. You can see indicatively shown, there's kind of markings on the plan where you can see the private garden areas for each of the flats, but as this is a application for permission in principle, the full details of any kind of garden layouts and interaction with flats would be determined at MSC stage.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ferguson. Does that help, Councillor Allen? We've still got Councillor Allen. Ms. McBain, could you maybe try and get Councillor Allen on her mobile, just to make sure that she's able to participate? If we could just pause for one moment, folks. We had a similar incident with poor Councillor Nicholl at the urgent business, so I just want to.
I'm just going to go on mute, and I'll just try and phone Councillor Allen.
Okay, thank you. So I'll wait and take the other questions once we get Councillor Allen on the phone, just so that she can hear the answers to the questions and take part in the application. I've got Councillor Gregg and Councillor Cook after this.
Sorry, it's coming up as our voicemail when I'm calling her. I'll try and maybe join her through the actual meeting rather than on my mobile.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, hold on. Oh,
Welcome to the EE
Unknown
voicemail. I'm
participant
sorry,
is
but the
now
person
joining.
you've called is not a... After you finish your message, just hang up. Or to hear more options, please press 1.
Okay. Can we just...
Councillor Allen, sorry, Councillor Allen, are you there? I think no. It's just our voicemail. Right, let's see if I can. I'll try and invite her back. How did you resolve the problem, Councillor Nicol?
We just took a couple of minutes recess to be able to get them back online. I'm just having a look to see if
It's showing that she's still here.
Yeah, so she's obviously she's here, but she's obviously not being able to communicate properly. Given she's still on the call, we'll continue with questions and then I'll come back to Councillor Allen.
I'll keep trying to phone her.
Okay,
I'm
you're there, yay!
I am.
Perfect, Councillor Allen. Was that answer from Mr. Ferguson helpful?
I kind of lost it, so I'm not sure what he was saying, but I think it's fine.
Thank you. Mr. Ferguson, if you can say it very quickly, that'll be thanks.
Yeah, I can just recap. So I think if the question was in relation to the 3-bed units in garden ground, the full details of that would be determined at or assessed and determined at matter specified in conditions application stage. However, indicatively on the information that we've got at this stage, you can see the 3-bedroom units at ground floor of the central and western blocks, each with access to small garden areas, other units with access to private garden areas on the eastern block, and then 3-bedroom units at a higher level in the 5th and 6th floors of the central and eastern blocks, most of which would have access to the private terraces.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ferguson. Councillor Gregg and Councillor Cook.
Thank you, convener. The urban realm improvements are very positive to see. Could I ask if there is unrestricted access through that area, because that will remain private with public right of way, and that's in the condition. But is the access 24-hour and unrestricted?
Yes. So if you can see my screen and my cursor,
yeah.
The area running along the front of the site at the back of the car park, that would be public, so that would be available to be accessed and used by wider members of the public. And indeed, actually, even though the more kind of privatized, semi-privatized courtyards of amenity space between the buildings, even though they would be more semi-privatized in their nature, they would probably be accessible to members of the public as well, I would guess. Finer details of that would be determined at MSC stage, but certainly this kind of corridor along here would be publicly accessible.
Okay, that's good to see, because I think that's a very valued contribution towards the public realm. Although I am wondering if there might be some conflicts looking ahead into the future between public use and private residence, but that's not for us to deal with today. I also wanted to ask about there was mention of various enhancements public art and so forth. Is there any proposed use of granite at all in this development? To which although there's no granite to reuse, I think it might be an interesting point to add in.
There's not been any discussion of that at this stage. Like as you say, there's no granite on site at the moment, so the policy that requires granite to be reused isn't really applicable in this instance. And any details of materials would follow on a matter specified stage.
Right. Okay. So okay, that's great. Many thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gregg. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, it's had a useful exchange of emails with Mr. Lewis earlier in the week on this one. And just for the benefit of the recording, if officers can confirm that it would be in order, if we do approve this, it will be in order to attach an additional condition on broadband. It's a city centre development. It's a flatter development. So if we had a condition requiring fibre to the premises rather than fibre to the cabinet, can officers just confirm that would be fine to do from a planning point of view? I think it would be consistent with policy CI1 in both the existing and the proposed LDP.
Mr. Ferguson.
Yep, I believe that is acceptable, and we're happy to attach a condition in that regard.
Okay,
yep, that's fine. That's it from me. Thank you, convener.
Okay, Councillor Gregg. Oh, your hand's gone down now. Have we got any other questions for Mr. Ferguson? No. Okay, we have the recommendation on page 33 of a willingness to approve subject to conditions and legal agreements to secure developers' obligations towards education, healthcare, car clubs, bus stop upgrades. The conditions can be found on page 57 to 63. There was 19 of them, but with the addition of Councillor Cook's suggestion, that will be up to 20 conditions. We've also got a number of advisory notes on page 63 to 67. Is anybody otherwise thinking? No. Can we just, again, because it's a recorded session, if I could just get Ms. McBain to go through the committee and do a roll call on their position. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. So just for the recording, I'll just make sure everybody's in agreement for the application. So to approve the application as contained in the report with the extra condition from Councillor Cook. Convener, are you content?
You're approaching the maximum allowed time for recording a message. If you wish to record further, please choose the append option from the menu. If you've finished recording, just hang up. If you don't carry on recording or hang up, your message will be deleted. To listen to your message, press 1.
Sorry, I think that's
to
Councillor
re-record
Allen's
your
voice.
message, press 2. To continue recording your message, press 3. If you're happy with your message, press 4. To specify a number for your message recipient to call you back on that's different to the number.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
Okay.
So Councillor Bolton, are you content to approve?
Agreed.
Councillor Jennifer Stewart?
Agreed.
Councillor Allen?
Agreed.
Councillor Cook?
Agreed.
Councillor Copeland?
Agreed.
Councillor Alphonse?
Agreed.
Councillor Gregg?
Agreed.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Agreed.
And Councillor Malik?
Agreed.
Okay, that's the application approved unanimously.
Yeah. And as we've heard from Mr. Ferguson, a number of matters, obviously this is planning in principle, will have to come back through matter specified, so I'm sure we'll hear how it goes forward. Okay, thank you folks. Moving on to planning item 7.2, which is detailed planning permission, alterations to convert a single dwelling erection of a single story extension and installation of roof lights rear, alterations to windows and doors, alteration to boundary walls, internal alterations to partitions with associated work, 10 the Channery Aberdeen, and that's reference 200391. And we have Miss Brazier. I could just bring you in now.
Okay, is that working? I'll just see if I can share the screen again as well.
Thank you.
Yes, like I was before. Right, can you see the slide now?
And not yet. That's it. Yep, we're there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. In this presentation, I'm going to deal with items number 7.2 and 7.3 at the same time, if that's all right, because 7.3 is the associated list of building consent for the same proposal, basically, just to save a little bit of time. So the applications are for detailed planning permission and listed building consent at 10 Channery in Old Aberdeen. The property is a Category B listed building to the west of the Channery and roughly opposite St Mach's Cathedral, and it's set in a very large plot. It's about 120 metres to the west of the Channery itself. I will give a brief overview of the applications and the issues, and then I will take you quickly through the slides. As the description says, the proposal consists of various elements, including a single-storey extension, alterations to windows and doors, installation of roof lights, and various internal alterations. The single-storey extension would be of a modern design and would require creation of an opening in the original rear elevation. It would be finished in glass and zinc to the west and south elevation, and it would have a stone wall to the north. The rear door will be replaced with a new glazed door. This is not an original door, that will be removed. And in the same elevation, the opening of a basement window will be increased and a new window fitted, and 3 conservation roof lights will be fitted in that roof slope. Internal alterations are all specified in the committee report, but include the installation of new partition walls and the removal of some small sections of wall in various rooms. Both applications have been referred to Planning Committee, as each received a total of 7 letters of objection, including from the Old Aberdeen Heritage Society. These letters were the same for both applications, and all letters raised similar issues as set out detailed in the committee report. They mainly focus on the impact of the extension on the character and appearance of the listed building, its modern form and design, and proposed materials. The main issue to be considered is the impact of the proposal on the listed building and the Old Aberdeen Conservation Area. This is discussed in full in the committee report, which is part of this agenda. Officers considered that the proposed design of the extension will make an acceptable assertive contrast with the character of the listed building and its setting within the Old Aberdeen Conservation Area, and that all other alterations to the building, both external and internal, are acceptable and would not have an adverse impact on the Old Aberdeen Conservation Area. Both applications are therefore recommended for approval, subject to various conditions, including submission of further detailed sectional drawings, submission of samples of materials, and a scheme for the reuse of granite on the site. I'll now take you through the slides. Go to that one. So here you can see the site where the hand is the building itself. The Channery is down here, and you've got St Mach's Cathedral immediately to the east. Here's an aerial photograph. These are the existing and proposed site plans. So that's the existing site plan, and here is the proposed. You can see that here to the rear is going to be the extension. These are the existing elevations. Next up are the detailed, are the proposed elevations. I can possibly zoom in a little bit if that would help.
Okay.
So that is the site elevation. So here you've got the stone wall. Then that's the other side elevation, which will be mainly, these are 2 large windows, and that will be zinc cladding. The front's not being altered, and here, I can zoom in a bit more. Here you can see the rear elevation will be completely framed in glass as well. So I'll go to the next slide. Here is a visual of what the extension would look like against the building. Here are some floor plans. So this is the basement. The red lines are the walls that will be removed. And here is, this one is the ground floor. Here's the extension, and that will be the part of the original wall that will be removed in the original window. And here you can see a bit more of detail of the removal of the wall. So that's where the existing window is. So they've chosen basically because they're taking out the window, that will take up quite a large chunk of the opening that they need to make, as that will be the entire opening that they need to make to get into the extension. And here just some photos of the building at the moment. So that's rear elevation. And another one. So are there any questions?
Okay. Members, questions for Ms. Brazier? Questions? That's quite unusual for us. Okay, you've obviously done a good job explaining it, Ms. Brazier. My iPad just disappeared. Give me 1 second to get back to the space on it. Get back up. We have. Apologies. Yes, sorry. That's
Sorry.
Greg.
Thank you, convener. With such a sensitive historical site, there will obviously be a real focus on ensuring good quality materials are used in this proposal. And I wanted to ask in particular about the use of gabions, because you don't usually associate those with particularly high standards of development. Why are they considered acceptable in this case?
They'll be used for the basically for shoring up the garden wall. So it depends a bit on what type of stone they're going to use for the gabions as well. But we're adding a condition asking for samples and details of exactly what materials will be used.
All right. So that will be subject to monitoring as well. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's reassuring. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Councillor Fons.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to see if it would be the stone wall would be rebuilt using granite rubble, or what material were you going to use for that?
At the moment, it is still specified as stone, but like I said before, it hasn't been specified yet. The granite that is coming out of the building itself will be reused. So one of the conditions is kind of a feasibility of where this granite will be reused. Whether it could be part of the wall, it could be part of the gabions. We're asking for details of exactly what it's going to be, so it hasn't been specified yet.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fons. Any other questions from us? I think I keep your hand down, sorry, Alison. Any other questions? No? Okay, the recommendation is to approve conditionally. You can find the recommendations on page 125 and 126. There is 6 of them, and there's an advisory note on 126 as well. I will be moving the recommendations. I think it's really nice to see this house returning to one house rather than a platted property. I know it's been on the market for a long time, and I think that what's been proposed does respect the character of the area. And I think the rear extension is such that it's not going to impact on the wider amenity of the area. And I'm comfortable with the conditions in place. Is anybody otherwise minded? No? Okay, again, Ms. McBain, can we just go through the roll call to get
No problem. Thank you, convener. So if members, again, just for the recording, could let me know if they're content to approve the application in line with the recommendation. So Councillor Bolton?
Agreed, and it's on both the
sorry, for the two applications and the listed building consent one as well.
Yes,
Councillor Bolton?
I agree.
Councillor Jennifer Stewart?
I agree.
Councillor Allen?
Agree both.
Councillor Copeland?
Agree both.
Councillor Alphonse?
Agreed both.
Councillor Gregg?
Content.
Okay. Councillor Mackenzie?
Agreed both.
And Councillor Malik?
Agreed both.
Thank you.
Lindsay, you forgot me, but I agree both.
Sorry.
You're all right.
Councillor Cook, thank you. So that means the two applications are approved unanimously in line with the recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much. Obviously, folks, we're now, having dealt with 7.3 at the same time, we're now moving on with the recommendation of one of refusal. Before we go on to the item, can I just check that you all received the additional note that was circulated from Environmental Health on the application at 8.1? I'm not hearing you haven't, but I'm sure Ms. Brazier will cover it in her submission. So we have 8.1 detailed planning permission, change of use from a public house to a hot food takeaway, alterations to the shop front, and installation of ventilation and extractor system, Ferry Hill Tavern, 124 South College Street, pages 139 to 160 on the agenda pack, and it's planning reference 200094. Ms. Brazier.
Okay, I'll go back to sharing the screen again. Is it sharing presentation?
And not yet.
It's still circling on mine. Oh, there we go.
Doing a circle thing.
Yeah, it's up on mine now.
Okay, it's not. That's it. It's there now.
Okay. Right, so this following applications for the change of use of a pub to a hot food takeaway, which would mainly serve pizzas, and external alterations, including the installation of a new shop front and extraction ventilation system with outlets on the rear and side elevation. The Ferry Hill Tavern is located on the corner of South College Street and Bank Street and has been vacant for a number of years by now. I will first again give a quick overview of the application and then I'll take you through the slides again. So this application has been referred to Planning Committee as we have received 6 letters of objection. There are also 14 letters of support. The matters raised are again all detailed in the committee report that's part of this agenda and included concerns in relation to parking, servicing and an increase in traffic and adverse impacts on residential amenity due to noise and smells. The main issues are twofold and the committee report included 2 recommended reasons for refusal. The first one is related to parking of both customers and delivery drivers and of servicing vehicles. Roads Development Management have objected to this application. The site is located on a busy main arterial route towards the south. It's on South College Street and immediately on the junction with Bank Street, which itself is quite a steep slope up. The proposed use is likely to increase the demand for short stay parking, and due to the short duration of visits, it is considered unlikely that customers would circle and look extensively for an available leaking parking space in the surrounding streets. There's not a lot of parking nearby on Bank Street, and it cannot be assumed that these will always be available for both customers or delivery drivers. Parking on the other side of South College Street is considered to be unacceptable, as this would result in an increase both in turning movements on this very busy road and in people potentially crossing South College Street at this point, which is likely to have an adverse impact on their safety. It is therefore considered that the proposal could result in indiscriminate parking and would have an adverse impact on public safety. In addition, supporting information sets out that the existing parking bays immediately next to the Ferry Hill Tavern will be used for servicing of the premises. Based on the size of the servicing vehicle proposed, up to 3 parking bays could be required, and again, it cannot be guaranteed that these will be available for use. This is not considered to be a robust servicing strategy, and as such, it is considered that the site is not suited to the proposed use due to the lack of parking, lack of space for servicing, and due to the site's location on a junction of a busy main road. The second one is in relation to the potential for noise disturbance coming from the proposed ventilation and extraction system. And this is where the update from Environmental Services comes in. So we received a last minute updated consultation response from Environmental Services earlier in the week. As part of the application, a noise impact assessment was submitted. That in itself did not cover all the information requested by Environmental Services, and as such, at the time of writing the report, Environmental Services could not support the application. However, following further discussions between the Planning Service and Environmental Services, they are now satisfied that these outstanding concerns, especially in relation to noise emissions from operating activities and their impacts on the flats above, could be mitigated, and that this could be dealt with through a suitably worded condition. They've therefore now withdrawn their objection to the application, and it's recommended that this reason for refusal is no longer pursued. So, taking account of this, it is recommended that the application is refused, but just on the first reason for refusal as detailed in the committee report, which is based on the objection from Roads Development Management that insufficient parking would be available for both customers and delivery drivers and servicing vehicles, that the proposal could result in unacceptable levels of congestion and would have a detrimental impact on road and pedestrian safety on both South College Street and Bank Street. And I'll now quickly take you through the slides again. So the site is etched in red here. So you've got South College Street and Bank Street and the arches opposite.
It's not come up yet.
Oh, hang on. And something's gone wrong with the share screen.
That's it, yeah, we're there.
Oh, right, you're there now. There's a delay because I'm moving.
Okay.
Let me just check whether it should come, I imagine. Let me just stop screen sharing and then try again.
Okay, thank you.
Is the site plan coming up now?
Yes, it's up there now, thanks.
Okay, that's fine then. So you've got Bank Street running east-west and South College Street there. These are the external alterations. The alterations to the shopfront itself were considered to be acceptable and in line with supplementary guidance on shops and signs. So I haven't provided much more detail on that, but those were considered to be acceptable. And that's the west elevation facing Bank Street. So again, the external alterations will basically be these two. They will put two grills in existing openings. So again, that will be accepted. And here is a floor plan. It's noted that they just proposed to use the granite part of the building, so they weren't looking at using the extension to the back. And here's a site photo. So are there any questions?
Okay. Members, questions for Ms. Brazier? Councillor Allen first, and then I've got Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, convener, and I sincerely hope I don't get frozen. I see in the report that there are 6 objections and 14 supports, but yet within the report you list 10 issues under objections, but only 3 for support. Is that a balanced report?
Yeah, the letters of support were, as much as anything, a lot of them weren't from people living in Aberdeen, which was quite interesting, but they also all raised the same kind of issues. They were just supporting the application. There were various that didn't really state why they were supporting them, just that it was a good idea, basically.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, convener. I was really just wanting to clarify again how long the building had been left empty.
I'm not entirely sure. Maybe Mr. Lewis will be able to know this better. I know the first application for service apartments was back in 2014, so it has been empty for a long time, but exactly how long, I'm not sure.
Also, if I may, convener, it was just to clarify that I've not been inside that building before, not even 5 years ago. So, but I mean, what is the actual condition of it? Do we know that?
No, it's not a listed building, so any internal alterations wouldn't need planning permission or listed building consent. So I don't know what's inside the building.
And is it going to? I was just trying to clarify if it was a granite building from the picture, but I just wondered, if it's left alone, whether it will sort of deteriorate significantly and become an eyesore.
There are flats on the upper stories, so the first floor and in the attic space there are 3 flats, so I imagine the building itself will still be in a fairly good state. So it's not completely abandoned, it's just the ground floor that hasn't been in use for a long time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg.
Yes, thank you. Could I ask about the environmental health assessment? So there was mention of the evaluation of the impact of odour. What about the impact of noise? What are the views from the professionals on the impact of noise, particularly on the residents of that block? is that not a factor? Is that not still a factor to consider?
Can I maybe ask if Mr. Glover could answer that question?
Yes, thank you, convener. Nick Glover here. Yeah, the applicant did submit a noise impact assessment, and through review, it was discovered that it hadn't covered all noise impacts that could have an effect on residents above the proposed development. So that was the initial reason for rejecting the assessment. And then, as it's already been stated in the presentation, that it's felt that the outstanding potential noise impacts are still only considered, but it's likely that they can be mitigated against following an assessment.
Okay, thank you for that. So that's the reason why noise as an environmental health factor wouldn't be one of the reasons for refusal. Okay, thank you.
Has anybody got any other questions? Because I have not seeing any hands. Ms. Fraser, could you bring up a kind of slide to show the parking area that's been proposed? I've got you, Councillor Copeland. I'll take your next.
Is the site plan the best one?
Yeah, it's not come up. Just got you.
Oh.
I mean, it is an iPad. It's easier if you can use your mouse thing on it. Okay. I'm going to swap my glasses. Okay. So the suggestion is that it comes in. I'll let you explain it.
Is it for servicing or parking?
Both, please. I just
Both.
want to
Okay. So their proposed servicing strategy is to use the existing parking bays on Bank Street, which are probably roughly starting from here.
Okay, because I was going to say, it's just, I was confused because I thought one of the pictures I saw, it had double yellow lines.
There are double yellow lines on the corner and along here and along the first part of Bank Street. That's right. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. And then the parking is immediately.
It's bays along Bank Street, basically. A parking survey was submitted. It was one that was undertaken a couple of years ago because obviously with the coronavirus, any kind of parking survey undertaken at the moment wouldn't give a proper representation of the actual situation. But we accepted that because there hasn't been any kind of major changes in this general area. So it's probably still a fairly accurate picture. But that parking strategy, the parking survey covered a very large area. So it kind of went from the junction up here all the way down to the roundabout, from Bank Street, the whole length of Bank Street and a large part of Prospect Terrace. And it's just considered unlikely that customers who would pick up pizzas would drive all the way down Bank Street and then walk all the way back to pick up their pizzas and then walk. So that was one of the reasons why we didn't accept those findings.
Yeah, part of the submission about the proportion of deliveries versus the portions of people picking up.
Yes, I can't remember the exact figures, to be honest. I need to look them up. There's
right now.
I can find those figures if.
Yeah, well, it's just that I noticed we did approve an application. I'm assuming, I'm making an assumption here that it was put forward for approval for a restaurant.
Yes.
Back in December 2017. Now, I'm obviously not aware because I didn't get back as far as looking at it. If there was an objection from roads at that time, and it's just that obviously the likelihood is there's going to be more parking for people. Given the fact that we got that there'll be a lot of home deliveries, and we see that with some other well-known pizza companies.
The difference between the restaurant application and this one, as far as the roads comments are concerned, are indeed there are up to 5 delivery drivers here at any time, so they would just stop in quickly to pick up their new deliveries and then drive off again. And the same for the customers. It's much more likely that they're short visits rather than for a restaurant where you go for a certain amount of time and you're more likely to have drinks. You're more likely to either use public transport, or because you're going to be there for a longer period of time, you're more likely to just drive around a bit more and find and park somewhere a little bit further up the road than if you just want to nip in and quickly get your food and then go home. So it's a different kind of customer base, that a different kind of trips that we're looking at, and that's the main difference between the two.
Yeah, I suppose I'm just looking at personal experiences. If I'm getting a pizza, I always have it delivered. And certainly my children would seem to find it alien to go and actually pick one up. I had Councillor Copeland next.
Thank you, Convener. I mean, I'm looking at page 147 in the servicing and the points that you've made about the pizza deliveries. This was formerly a public house. Yes. They got deliveries of beer with dirty big lorries. So really, I think it's pretty spurious saying that deliveries would be difficult when a pub was getting deliveries there already. And a restaurant, which we were prepared to do, would also need to get deliveries. So I don't think that one really holds water. Regarding people picking up pizzas, I think the report itself says that most of the deliveries are made by people on bicycles or scooters. There wouldn't be a lot of cars as such using the premises. I think it says something like 20% or something. But again, as you've said yourself, it's short in and out. And I don't see that as a major problem for this one, to be perfectly honest. That's all I had to say.
Yeah, okay. I don't think there was an actual question there. There was a Councillor Copeland. It's just to make sure to give Ms Brazier a chance to answer.
The question basically is, how bad do they think the problem really is going to be? How would you compare it to deliveries for a pub?
Okay, Mr Cowie, I think we'll take you in since you're the roads guy.
Hi, sorry, it would actually be myself for this one.
Oh, sorry.
That's
yes,
okay. So I suppose there was maybe two questions there. One was, how does it compare to the pub? And I suppose in that regard, you're not wrong that whatever goes in here would have to have some form of servicing. It's just that on the whole, this combined with the parking issues, there's almost no redeeming features from a roads perspective, whereas for a restaurant, yes, deliveries would be just as difficult, but at least people would go and park somewhere to go and have a sit-down meal, whereas here, it would be people nipping in and out. And the second part of your question was, well, I suppose you made a comment that a lot of deliveries are done by bicycle now. I would argue that that's for third-party delivery companies like Deliveroo and Just Eat and things, whereas for this, well, I don't know if it would have to be a Papa John's, but I believe that's what's proposed. And I believe they have their own delivery drivers who do all have vehicles. And the Papa John's, certainly near where I stay, it's all cars. And the issue we took with them there in this application, sorry, is that they said they'll have 5 drivers who will juggle 2 permits between them, which is just not a practical solution. How do they do that? Do they have to hang about and keep dropping off the permit to each other? But surely they're trying to deliver pizzas in a timely manner. They're not going to stop to hand out permits to one another. I'm not sure if that answers your questions or if there's any further clarification.
Councillor Copeland?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any further questions for Mr Ferguson or Ms Brazier? No. Okay, on page 139, the recommendation is one of refusal.
Sorry to interrupt, Councillor Mackenzie's got her hand up.
Sorry, Councillor Mackenzie, would you like to come in?
I was just trying to, my dog stopped barking.
All right.
I used to work just down from the Ferry Hill Tavern. That was our local pub. And there is no parking. I would have serious issues knowing the area.
Okay, is there a question, Councillor Mackenzie?
No,
we're still at questions. Okay, thanks. Councillor Fons, is that a question? Councillor Fons, your question?
A question, maybe an observation. I mean,
well, can I just stop? I was just saying to Councillor Mackenzie, we're just at questions that will bring in observations through the.
Or can I maybe just ask then, make it a question that would officers not agree that, I mean, there's hundreds of flats round about that area would they not agree that there would be a lot of people on foot? Mr. Lynch, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I don't dispute that, and I'm sure there will be. I'm just purely looking, well, I'm looking from a pedestrian and a roads perspective, and I've got no issue with pedestrians at all. It's just my concerns are all from a roads nature in this case.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alphonse. Councillor Q.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, just a question for officers. In terms of, it's been the place has been empty for 5 or 6 years. What weight should we give to that in planning terms, if any, in reaching a decision?
I think, Councillor Cook, I'll answer that. That's for you to decide. That's what we're here for. The officers have made their decision using the various weights. We're here to use our judgment to give the value on what we believe is a consideration, if you like. So I'm afraid it's back to us on that one. We've had a similar question just recently, an LRB, and it is about us giving the relevant weights. We've heard from our officers that they obviously have considered the whole picture, and this is their viewpoint. So it's really for us to determine whether we think that's a considering fact.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Cook. Any other questions? No? Okay, right. Moving back to the report, the recommendation on page 139 is one of refusal. You know, it's a very difficult application to consider, because I think, Councillor Cook, yourself, you've just mentioned the fact that it has been empty for a number of years, but also for me, part of its planning history is relevant. The fact that it's been a public, it's been a restaurant, so it has had various guises through the years. I suppose it's up to us whether we feel that, given the information that we've been provided by officers, particularly our roads teams, because we've heard that obviously the environmental health have said that there is a condition that could be put on that can mitigate any of their concerns. It's for us to determine if we feel that the refusal is warranted on the grounds that the roads are put forward. I always have a lot of respect for our roads colleagues, particularly if there is road safety issues, but on this occasion, I feel that coming down on a kind of a pragmatic point of view, I think that we could, or I would be happy to recommend approval for this application with a condition that Ms. Brazier could put on from environmental health. I think we have an operation which I think will be primarily delivery, or as it was mentioned, I think by Councillor Alphonse, you know, we have a heavily populated area there. I mean, I think a lot of people will walk over and pick up. I think we've had, it has been a restaurant or where people will, or there's approval for a restaurant where people would obviously want to find a parking space for longer. I think we've got a lot of takeaway venues that have similar restrictions, but I think with the delivery services now being very well organised, I think that can be managed, because I can't imagine that it'll be a problem during the day, because most of these places operate later on. I just feel that on balance that it's one that we should take a chance and approve. We have got city wardens, so that people are abusing and parking on double yellows, that they will be able to deal with that. And if it's a safety thing, the police can intervene. So on balance, I would be moving approval with the additional condition, or with a condition that would get wording from an environmental health concern. Is anybody otherwise minded? We've got two. Councillor Stewart, is your hand up to second, or is it an alternative?
It was actually up to second you, because I agree. I think in these very difficult times, we should be welcoming businesses and putting on those conditions, but I think we should be supporting this, in my view.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gregg, were you?
I would be moving refusal. I'd be moving the officer recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gregg. Does Councillor Gregg have a seconder? I'm not. Oh, Councillor Cook.
I'm minded to go with you, convener, but in order to facilitate debate, I'm happy to second Councillor Gregg formally.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there any debate?
Could I speak?
Oh, sorry, Councillor Gregg. Yes, apologies. Councillor Gregg, what would you like to say?
Thank you, convener. I know the area relatively well. I have huge concerns about the road safety issues at this location. I think, well, it's a major north-south route from the city centre out of town and back, and that particular section of South College Street is quite compromised. There are businesses on the other side. There are parking bays that it's always busy. There are problems already with parking and road safety. The road turns round under the bridge over onto Riverside Drive, and the pavement edges are not always clear. When you're talking about a hot food business, you're looking at customers stopping for just a few minutes and popping in, and I think that because it's such a busy route, you would have a lot of examples of people stopping to park to pop in. I have experience of this type of business in Holborn Street, where there have been constant problems with the hot food delivery vans parking on double yellows, on pavements, compromising road and pedestrian safety. So I think it would actually be a case of protecting the company from itself if we were to refuse this, because we would be preventing them from causing problems for others and for their own business. It is a property that was a public house previously, but that's of a completely different nature. You don't have people popping in for a few minutes on a regular frequency. So huge concerns. I think there are very considerable risks from parking. It will not just be people from the local area. It will be that very large passing trade who will stop on that really difficult, narrow, compromised section of South College Street. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Gregg. Councillor Cook, do you want to say anything, given your formal, or would you rather enter debate?
No, really convenient. Just to say, I've seconded Councillor Gregg to facilitate the debate. I think it is finely balanced. I think I've got a lot of sympathy for what Councillor Gregg has said, but on balance, given this is a sector that's taken a battering over the last few months, on balance, I'll be going with you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cook. I have Councillor Copeland.
Thank you, convener. I will be supporting you in this one. I think we have spoke long and hard about the regeneration of the city centre. Here we are just outside the city centre, where premises have been empty for over 6 years. And I think it's incumbent on us to try and encourage business. So for that reason, I think we should, in this case, approve this one. There's traffic wardens and things that can be used to implement it if there's problems, and necessary changes can be made if required. So I think it's incumbent on us to do things to try and regenerate areas. So I would definitely be supporting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Copeland. Councillor Stewart, you've got your hand up, but I did take you in as my seconder. Are you indicating you were wanting to speak? Because you've already. I may be cutting you short.
Yeah, it was just be short, but I did want to. I didn't realise we were going to be entering into debate actually. Yes, I did want to say something if I'm allowed. If I'm not allowed, fair enough. But
I think if you wouldn't mind, Councillor Stewart, it's just that I wouldn't want it to be seen as that we were compromising the decision. So apologies, I cut you a bit short earlier, but it would probably be safer if we maybe didn't have further comment from you at this point. Apologies.
Yep, sorry, under standing order 29.5.2. Once it's been seconded, the member cannot enter debate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Stewart. Is there anybody? Yeah. Is there anybody else wishing to take enter debate? No. Okay. Summing up, Councillor Gregg.
Well, I think that in the interests of road safety, this application needs to be refused. Businesses, we all need to support and promote businesses and help them wherever possible, but they need to operate in a safe environment, not just for their customers, but for the general public. So I have real concerns at creating an unsafe environment around these premises. I think it's unrealistic to put the burden on wardens to patrol the area. Wardens don't operate in the evenings, which is when a business such as this would perhaps be at its busiest. So I'm happy to support what the officers have recommended. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gregg. I think we heard from many that this is a finely balanced decision. I think for me, it's the fact that this has a significant history, and the 2017 application was determined under the same local development plan as we're currently sitting with. I am thinking policies, or there's only a minor tweak. And then, Councillor Gregg, I do think the wardens work in the evening as well, perhaps not late into the evening, but they are there. However, we can't judge this, how things will react immediately at this premises, because you've witnessed problems on Holborn Street with others. You know, each application has to be determined with its own merits and considerations. I'm satisfied. One of my main concerns was obviously the environmental health objection, which has been withdrawn, subject to a condition being put in place. Give me one moment. My phone had kept ringing, so I took it off the hook and now it's buzzing at me. So apologies for that. But no, I mean, I'm content that we've given consideration. I do believe there is parking available for the drivers. I don't believe that they'll all be there at once. I think that a lot of people will make their way there, given it's a heavy residential area, by foot to collect. The property has been empty for, I think, coming up 6 years. It's had alternative uses such as a pub, so we know that deliveries can be delivered. So I think it is a fine balanced application, but I believe that we're making the right decision for recommending approval and giving this premises a new lease of life as it moves forward. So if we could just go to the vote, Ms. McBain.
I think Lisa's just got her hand up if you want to.
Oh, Lisa, where are you? Lisa, sorry.
It was just to say, Councillor Chair, that just to make sure that if we are going on against officers' recommendation, to make sure that you relate that back to policies and that you have a, right proper planning reasons. And we could, if you wish, have a short adjournment to speak about that.
Okay, well, given that I make everybody else take an adjournment, I better follow my own guidance. So if we could just pause for 5 minutes and I'll get Mr. Lewis on the line. Okay, so if we pause.
For 5 minutes, is it?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll just read this wording for the
thank you
recording. So please note that Councillor Bolton has moved a motion and in order to review appropriate wording with officers, the meeting will be adjourned for 5 minutes. Please note that the recording will continue. Therefore, it is a reminder to please switch off your microphone and camera during this adjournment. Thank you.
Right, I think we're all back. Councillor Stewart, you're back. Councillor Mr. Lewis, Mr. Thompson, and Ms. Christie. Yeah, we're all there. Okay, so as I say, I've got the motion. We've heard from Councillor Gregg. So I was saying that the reason for going against officer's recommendation was, whilst we appreciated there was a level of tension with policy T2, given those previous uses, which I alluded to, such as the deliveries, the restaurant, and the deliveries for the pub, etc., that we believe with the change in the way that home delivery, pizzas and stuff are made now, the fact that people could actually appear in person on foot, because it's a heavily residential area, that we were content that there wasn't enough to refuse it purely on T2. We'd had the environmental health refusal or objection, should say, removed, and with the additional condition, we felt that we were comfortable that we were covering that element. Also, if you look at Scottish planning policy, that they do promote that we should look for sustainable economic growth, and I think this fits comfortable. It is a material consideration. So with that all in mind, I think that concludes my reasons for going against officer's recommendation. Lisa, you've got your hand up. Is that from before or? Can't hear you. That's it, okay.
Sorry, Councillor Bolton, apologies, it was from before. Sorry.
That's all right, no problem. Could I ask Ms. McBain just to go to the vote now, please?
Thank you, convener. The committee has before it a motion in the name of the convener to approve the application and an amendment in the name of Councillor Gregg to refuse the application. Members, please vote motion on amendment. Convener?
Motion.
Councillor Stewart?
Motion.
Councillor Allen?
Motion.
Councillor Cook?
Motion.
Councillor Copeland?
Motion.
Councillor Alphonse?
Motion.
Councillor Gregg?
Amendment.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Motion.
And Councillor Malik?
Motion.
Okay, the motion carries 8 votes to 1, so therefore the application is approved with the condition from environmental health.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that now concludes the meeting. You'll have on your agenda that the next meeting date is the 20th of August. Just to let the planning committee know as well, at the urgent business, we agreed to resume pre-applications as soon as possible, because we have a number of them waiting in the sidelines to hear. And I think we'll all agree that they're very useful, because if you look at the first application, Greyfriars House, I think we all had a lot of input at that pre-application. I think we've seen merits of it with the application that came before us, even though it's just planning in principle. So I'm welcoming getting the pre-application forums back in line, and we'll certainly keep you in the loop when they start. So thank you all very much for today. Next meeting, 20th of August. So have a nice summer for those of you who are going to take your holidays in your back garden or wherever. Thank you to all the officers for your attendance today and your assistance. We will now cease the recording, and that will be the end of the session. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll just read out this word in here. I can confirm that the meeting has now concluded and that the recording will now be stopped. So thank you for your interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McBain.
Thank you,
everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.